Welcome to Simi Valley's first ever Community Reads. Choosing a featured title for a Community Reads initiative is always a challenge, but finding the right book for 2020 was exceptionally difficult. Seed Folks, an enjoyable read with a deceptively simple story, perfectly hits the mark. In 2020, we're all more alert to the basic needs such as food and connections with other people. We enjoy seeing all the ways that Simi Valley is connecting with one another around Seed Folks, a book in which strangers who are all wary of one another become a community as they grow, cook, share, eat food together. And we're very honored to have with us today Paul Fleischman, the author of Seed Folks, as well as 40 other books and 3 plays. Paul Fleischman grew up in Santa Monica, California, hearing his father, Sid Fleischman, read his books aloud chapter by chapter as they were written. They both won a Newbery Medal. Father for The Whipping Boy in 1987, and Paul for Joyful Noise, Poems for Two Voices in 1989. 2 Newbery Medals in one family, that is extraordinary. And also with us today are Dave Rosenberg, teen librarian, Kristen Tignack, director of the City of Simi Valley's Youth Council, and 9 teens who serve on the Youth Council. And Kristen, will you please go ahead and introduce your teens? Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. The Simi Valley Youth Council is incredibly honored to be participating not only in the Simi Valley Public Library's Community Reads initiative, but to be here with Seed Folks author Paul Fleischman to ask engaging questions about his wonderful book. The members that will be asking their own insightful questions attend the following schools: Grace Brethren High School, Royal High School, Santa Susana High School, Simi Valley High School, Thousand Oaks High School, and Valley View Middle School. Without further ado, please welcome Abhishek Jagannathan, who will start us off with the first question.
A really enjoyable aspect about Seed Folks is the diversity of the characters. Did you have to do any research into the different cultural backgrounds for this book?
Absolutely. Do you know that if you were to write your memoir about your youth, I predict you would still have to do research about that. There's all kinds of things, large and small, that a writer needs to find out. And it's one of the skills of a writer, not just inventing stuff, finding out stuff. It used to be that you did that in a library. These days, you do it more online, but still often through books. You never know where it's going to take you. It's detective work. In the case of Seed Folks, the manuscript was pretty short, but I had far more pages of that than that of research on all kinds of topics. Cleveland, you know, what are the streets? What are the neighborhoods? Where are the parks? Growing things, you know, how do you grow stuff? I'm not much of a gardener myself. I have kind of a brown thumb. I love plants so much, I water them to death. I am an overwaterer, I admit it. And so I have limited experience myself. So I need to find out, yeah, what about pests? What about fertilizers? What about, how do you keep tomatoes from flopping down? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the different cultures represented. Of course, I had to research quite a few things there. You know, how would a recent Korean immigrant speak English? I researched that one both through books, articles, but also in person. Across the street from me happened to live a Korean immigrant. And he was an insurance agent. How he sold insurance, I have no idea, because his English was incredibly hard to comprehend. But I kind of took note of how he spoke. And so, you know, you research things all different ways. It's one of the fun parts of writing, because you go looking for facts and you often come back with fiction. You come back with ideas for scenes, ideas for characters, for incidents, for, you know, parts of your book that weren't there before. You come back with ideas for whole different books. Sometimes you stop the book you're on and go write those books because you come across something so interesting. So yeah, research is integral to being a writer. Good question.
The concept of community and caring for one another seems to be a prominent theme in the book. What was your inspiration for this theme?
Well, to answer that, I'm going to take you back many years to when I house sat somebody's house in the woods of New Hampshire. And I lived there for 2 years. And while I lived there, I began reading the books on that man's shelf. And one of those books had a big effect on me. It was by an anthropologist named Ruth Benedict, and it was called Patterns of Culture. It was a portrait of 3 different cultures worldwide. And what you learn from this book is that different cultures emphasize different things, different traits we have, and they bring them out. They praise them or they discourage them. And, you know, some cultures are really built around consensus and agreement and conformity. And suddenly, after reading that book, I felt like I finally saw my own culture from the outside for the first time. And American culture is not based on consensus. It is built all around individualism. That has some real advantages and some real disadvantages, both. And it seems like the bigger the town you live in, bigger the city you live in, the more that individualism comes into play, and the less feeling of a bond there is between people, that community that you spoke of in your question. And I wanted to write a book that would show that those generous connection, those bonds, those traits still do exist. And a place you find them is community gardens. I hope you can all find one somewhere, sometime. I'm sure you will. Take a walk through it. They're a little oasis. They're a little place that has its own microculture. Just like we have microclimates, it's a totally different culture. Inside that fence, inside that land, people are generous. People are trusting. People come together. It's the opposite of what you probably experience driving to there, right? Everybody in their separate car, everybody competing against everybody else to get where they're going first. So they're a little oasis, and I wanted to highlight that in the book. Because I think those traits are very important. They're crucial to a good life.
Which of the characters' perspectives was your favorite to write about and why?
Well, that's a good question. I actually took notes on your questions, and I can't remember what my answer is to that one. Oh, yes. Because I like all the characters. But I'd have to say I had the most fun writing Kim. She's the first in the book. And if any of you are interested in writing, I will share something with you. Writing openings is the hardest part of a book, but the most exciting. And what makes it so exciting, for me at least, is this fact. The author holds all the cards and the reader no cards. And what do? You carefully lay out a card here, and a card there, and a card there. And you let readers in on things when you see fit and as you see fit. And so I loved writing the Kim chapter. I loved it for a couple of other reasons too. Kim's father has died and he's never met her. And I didn't grow up in that situation at all. But you know what writers do? They don't usually cut and paste directly from their lives into a book. They change things. They alter them. They make males into females and old into young. That's one reason I've written for young readers all my life. I'm really writing a lot of my adult material, but it's been transformed. And in this case, my mother had died a few years before. And Kim's chapter, although it's a very different situation, was a way of dealing with that. One of many ways. I've written about her through various characters in various books. I also liked it because it was a powerful situation. Wanting to please, impress, connect with a parent you've never seen. My kids are adopted. That's kind of their situation as well. So her story had a lot of important connections, deep ones for me.
All right, so it's no surprise that the process of publishing a book can be super taxing and discouraging. Can you give a little insight based on your experience getting seed books published?
Well, you're exactly right. It can be very taxing, discouraging, especially when you're starting out. And what can I tell you? With Seed Folks, it was much easier for me. I had won the Newbery Award a few years, before that. So getting published wasn't hard. I actually had more trouble, oddly, getting published later in my career. So things change, things change all the time. But Seed Folks wasn't difficult. But that won't necessarily be your case if you're writing and just starting out. Writers usually have a day job. I had one. That's the job that pays your rent and keeps your electricity flowing. And if you're lucky, you get to quit your day job one day. Like many writers, I tried quitting mine too soon once, and then I had to go back. Oh, the embarrassment. But eventually, if you have good fortune and good skills, it's not impossible to make a living as a writer. In fact, of all the arts, it's the most possible. If you're in music, if you're in art, if you're in dance, you're almost surely going to teach. But there's thousands of writers out there making a living off their words. I had second jobs for the first 7 or 8 years. I don't know if that's an average time or not. That's what it was for me. I wish you all good luck who are going to go down that road. It's an exciting road. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's not an easy road, but it's a great road.
How did you decide that the name Seed Folks would be the title for your book?
Writers collect words and they collect names. I should probably record this and get all of your names and write them down, because I love unusual names and I see many here that are not on my list. So I came across the word Seed Folks in researching a different book. Seed Folks is an old term for ancestors. So I wrote that in my notebook. I have a notebook. You could keep one like it. It has ideas for books, ideas for characters, ideas just for scenes, for incidents. It has research, it has facts, it has names, boys' names, girls' names, last names. It's got all kinds of stuff in there. And it has, believe it or not, titles. Why would you write down titles for books you haven't even written? Why? Because the few words in the title of a book are the most important words in the book, as far as, what readers will see. That's what they'll see first, and what editors and publishers will see. So if you have a great title, you might just want to write a book around that title, as crazy as that sounds. That's probably not what you're going to do, but I'm sure it's been done. And Seed Folks, that seemed to me to be a really good one. Originally it was attached to a different project. I was going to write a book about first-generation immigrants. Are any of you first generation? You were born elsewhere, not in the US? Anybody? Well, that would be first generation. And I was going to interview, it's going to be a nonfiction book. I was going to interview them about their experiences coming here. I don't know if any of you have read the memoir I published last year, I think it was, called No Map, Great Trip. And in it, you can read some about my immigrant background, both on my mother's and my father's side. And you can see why I might want to write that book, because my grandfather had a rather dramatic and traumatic coming to America about 100 years ago. So it was a subject close to my heart. I didn't end up writing that book, but the title stayed. And when Seed Folks idea came up years later, there it was waiting for me. Perfect.
There were different people for each chapter. Is there a specific reason why you chose different people instead of just focusing on one person?
There is. So these days, it's very common for you to find a book that has multiple points of view, right? 2 characters who alternate back and forth, 3, 4, even more. But when I was writing Seed Folks and books before it, 30 years ago, there weren't any of those books. The first book that did that for children that I'm aware of, I wrote. It was called Bull Run. And it's the story of that first battle of the Civil War, told from 16 points of view. 8 Northern, 8 Southern, back and forth, back and forth. I got to that through music. I was very interested in music when I was your age, still am. I've messed around on a lot of instruments over the years, and I was interested in composing. And so I got to it by playing duets and playing in recorder groups and string quartets and all kinds of things like that. I loved chamber music. I wanted to bring that into books. And so that's how Bull Run came to be. It was really rather symphonic, 16 voices. Have you ever looked at a symphonic score? I wanted to write scores when I was a kid, not books. My father wrote books. Books are all over the place. Scores. Wow, those were cool. Get an image of a symphonic score. Easy to do. You just go to YouTube, plug in, do a search for Beethoven's Fifth, and look for the image that doesn't show an orchestra, but shows a score, the notes. I was in love with scores, and Bull Run was really like a symphonic score. And figuring out which character was where and what was said was very much like putting together a piece of music. And so after that was done, I wanted to do another book like that. I needed a large group. I needed a varied cast, and a community garden struck me as being perfect. So to answer your question, I wanted to keep going down that road and explore something different. In Bull Run, the characters repeat. They come back over and over. Some of them, 7 times. Seed Folks, I decided to do differently. They would just get one shot. But the early ones would mention characters who would appear later in the book. And the late ones would mention characters who had appeared earlier. And there would be a sense of cohesion. So that was what I was after.
What made you decide to cater your novella towards children versus adults?
Well, I was a writer for children, so I didn't have relationships with adult editors and adult publishers, so that was natural for me. It made the book a little hard to write because you probably want to have kids in a kid's book, and there weren't as many opportunities for kids in a community garden. So I had to really, that's one reason the book is short. And I got kids where I could in. I managed to get, a fair number of young people in there of various ages. But that's why I was a children's writer. I've done some adult work since then, and you could certainly write a book about a community garden for adults. It would be a much longer book. It would be a different book. And, but this was the way I wanted to do it.
In the second chapter, you introduced us to the character Anna. Why is Anna the only one staying in the apartment complex?
I don't know. You'll have to ask her. It's weird when people ask me questions about characters. I needed her to. I needed her to be sort of the historian of the neighborhood, as it were, the watcher. So some of the cast have a deep connection to me, as I explained with Kim. Some are there because they needed to be there. And when you're writing a book, you're going to find that to be true. So there's things you just need to happen. And so you invent a character to make that happen. And that was Anna. It was a way for me to give the history of the neighborhood. After all, this is not a book that has just sections of prose, Gibb Street is a street in Southwest Cleveland. It used to be a meat packing area and then received immigration from blah, 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 blah. can't do that in this book. So you need somebody there, a character, somebody speaking. So that became Anna.
Something that I thought was very beautiful about your book was how many people with different backgrounds, perspectives, and ages were all brought together, which is something that we really, all of us can learn from. So what lessons do you think your book teaches us?
Well, it does show that it can happen in a work of fiction. I think it can happen in real life too. As I say, go to a community garden, you will see fiction turned into fact. I'm pretty confident. Can it happen elsewhere? Of course it can. I think we've all, or you will soon, have experiences where people very different from you all bond over something that you have in common. That's commonplace. And it's a wonderful thing when it happens. In a way, it happens in the book world a lot. You have this invisible community you're part of as a reader, as a writer. It's a wonderful thing. But it happens in many different ways, I should say that I grew up without a lot of community. I was a boy in a family of girls, in a neighborhood of girls. Like, what was it with my neighborhood? There's like practically no boys. There's like 3 girls over there and 2 girls there and 3 girls there. And it wasn't, there wasn't a lot of community things going on when I was a kid there. I used to see families like walking to church. That looked kind of good to me. That must be fun. My parents said, you have no idea how lucky you are that you're not. That was their view of it. And so I was kind of hungry for community, really. And I found it really in music, among other places. So it's a need we all have to belong, to work on something. I love chamber music. I love playing music with other people. I like readers' theater. Again, just a group where where the sum is more than the sum of its parts, that great experience. Those of you who play an instrument know what I'm talking about. So that's my answer to that one.
All right, Paul, if you have time, can we do 3 more questions?
Take your time.
You're fine? Okay, great. So let's go ahead. Let's do 4 then. Let's do Ashlyn, Manishka, Ria, and Maya. Okay? With your next round of questions. Thank you.
Okay, so with the current social climate of the US, do you believe that discrimination in general is a learned characteristic or an innate trait?
What a great question. Well, I do not have believe it or not, the answer to that question. I don't know it, and I don't think anybody knows it at this point. There's certainly people who've written about it. And if you've read, let's see, who's the author who wrote Guns, Germs, and Steel? Jared Diamond. He teaches at UCLA, not too far from Simi Valley, and look up his book that came out after Guns, Germs, and Steel. Has a chapter on genocide. It has some answers for you there. It has some thoughts for you there. I would recommend that chapter highly, and I wish I could think of the name of the book. It's kind of, sorry about that. I should have researched that. So I don't know. I can certainly tell you that, discrimination seems to be pretty universal. That doesn't mean it's innate. That doesn't mean it's not taught. It can certainly be encouraged. It can also be discouraged. There's certainly a part of our brains that wants to gravitate towards stereotypes. Why? Saves us a lot of brain work. It's just easy to make snap judgments about people based on looks. It's hard to actually get to know people and find out about them. So we're lazy. Our brains are lazy. There's that same part of our brain is drawn towards scapegoating. Kind of a similar reason. It's very pleasant to put blame outside of ourselves and attach it to a certain group of people. It's easy, it's fast, And for some people, it's persuasive. And there's a certain part of our brain that is drawn toward violence. And how do we deal with these things? Well, we can, as I say, you can encourage or discourage them. So we all have a role to play here in ways large and small. I've always thought that just holding a door open for somebody, you're helping to do what Sam describes in the book. He describes it as like a fisherman sewing up the rips in his nets. And that's what I think I'm doing when I hold the door open. I'm trying to show that people care about other people. I'm trying to make a little tiny society right there in front of that door that's a little more cooperative, generous, caring. We can encourage empathy, we can encourage curiosity, we can encourage emotional intelligence, all the things that are the opposite of the things I named. And that's certainly what I try to do. And I have great faith in you all in carrying that on.
I know you kind of touched on this earlier, but the garden begins with Kim reflecting on her father. Was there any particular reason you chose to start with Kim?
Well, I wanted the garden started by somebody who would be sort of least likely to do it. Kim was not the kind of girl who would be president of her class. She's probably the kind of girl who'd be very shy and be in the back row. I wanted to show that little things can turn into really big, wonderful things. And so I wanted somebody like Kim to kick off the book, definitely. You know, one of the great things you need in any piece of writing is unpredictability. And so you're always, as a writer, looking for ways for that. That's one reason having multiple points of view is so great. With every new chapter, the reader doesn't know where he or she is. It's a new world. It's a new character, and that character's take on the world. So it keeps the readers off balance. That's really a good thing when you're a writer. I'm taking you behind the scenes now. See the way we think? It's so manipulative. Wow. But it's really good. I mean, as a reader, I appreciate that too. I can't read books that are predictable. If I know what's going to happen, why turn the page? So that's another reason to have picked Kim. And it was really nice at the end of the book to be able to have a character to look back, and there she is again, starting the garden the next year. And even that character doesn't know Kim's story, and doesn't know that Kim started the garden. Only the reader knows. That was fun to write.
All right, so seeing that Seed Folks is so complex and yet relatable to so many audiences, did you have to dedicate a lot of time and effort to develop and complete the novella?
Did I have to spend a lot of time on it? Well, I did. And again, those of you who are writers, this is for you. You might end up spending more time thinking about your book, planning it out, outlining it, putting it together, coming up with your cast, than you will on the writing. It's kind of like if you went to paint your bedroom. You wouldn't just start slopping paint on the walls. No. You would take masking tape and mask around your windows. You would fill up the holes with spackle. You would, do all kinds of things. You would figure out which paints you were going to use. Maybe you would do a test on the wall or a piece of plywood. You would do all these other things. And the last thing you would do would be to paint. So all of that work beforehand, some writers skip and they just plunge in and they really answer all those questions. Where's my book going? Who are my characters? What's the tone? How does it work? They answer all that in a very messy first draft, which they then burn. And but they write a second draft and they burn that one, but they get closer. And each draft, they get a little bit closer. And you can do it that way. My father was kind of like that. He got an idea. He wanted to put that paper in the typewriter and get going. I was an outliner, so I did a lot of planning. I did my research and I figured out who my cast was. And so I did all that first. So yeah, I did put time into developing the book. I did think it out pretty carefully. And even then, there were big things I didn't see. And if you've read the essay in the back of the book about the book, you know that I stopped the book. I abandoned it. I didn't think it was working for various reasons. I had some blind spots, and no writer is free of those. There are things you just don't see. Eventually, I went back to it. I'm glad I did. I finished it. I'm glad I did. Both of those manners of planning work, no planning or planning. It's interesting that I wrote a memoir called No Map, Great Trip, because I love maps. I love planning. The older I get, though, the more I improvise and the less planning I do. It's walking on the edge. I mean, your fingers always have that little film of sweat on them because you're walking a tightrope. You're starting a chapter, you're not sure how it ends. I used to know, now I don't. But it's exciting. And when it all pulls together, when it's working, oh my God, there is no greater thrill than that. Suddenly I see what playing jazz is like. That is exciting stuff. So they're both good. I've liked it both ways. Choice is yours.
We've touched on this one already, but which character do you think you relate to the most?
Well, I probably am most like Sam. He wants to save the world. He's been involved in social movements and things. He has a Jewish background. So all those things are like me. But actually, I'm in all the characters. As I told you about Kim, I have even deeper connections to Kim than to Sam. So again, that's what writers do. They put little bits of themselves and they take a little part and they turn that into a whole person often. Or maybe they combine two parts, and one's from them and one's from a movie they saw 13 years ago, and one's from somebody they heard about at a Thanksgiving meal 10 years ago. It's kind of like walking down a beach. You know, the stones that are there or the shells, some of them just showed up that morning, and some of them have been there for decades. So you're like that when you're looking for characters. That's why you keep that notebook that I mentioned, because you need some characters. You go down there and you see who jumps out at you. Who would be really good in this? Who do you really want to write about? So you kind of walk up and down your life. That's the way I do it anyway. Other people differently. There's no right way to write. There's just the way that works for you.
All right, and that concludes our author talk with Paul Fleischman. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today and providing this great story for our first ever community reads. It really felt like the perfect fit through invoking touching and accessible for all ages during what's kind of become a turbulent 2020. I'd also, of course, like to thank our Simi Valley Youth Council for their fantastic questions today, as well as all the groups throughout Simi who have been participating in our first community reads, discussing Seed Folks, and bringing the book out into the community. It's been really exciting to see just how many people were interested in creating groups for this month-long event. And again, thank you, Paul, so much, and have a great day, everyone.
I have with me here Jesus Hernandez, our circulation supervisor, who is the person that recommended the book Seed Folks for our first community reads. Jesus, when did you first read this book?
I first read it when I was in college in 2006 in a young adult literature class that I was taking.
And why does it stand out in your mind now? How come you recommended this book for community reads?
I just wanted to bring a sense of community and kind of get people engaged to kind of feel, to find a connection with everything that's going on and kind of find, you know, the camaraderie and the neighborhood and find how everyone's, you know, going through the same struggles, but finding the connections that we have with each other and community at large.
That's great. You definitely recommended the right book. And you also gave us a staff virtual tour of your garden for our staff discussion group on community reads. Tell us a little bit about your garden.
Yeah, I just wanted to show the staff the different things that I was growing in my back garden, and people really seemed to enjoy that, and it was really great showing some of the progress that we've made in the backyard. So it was kind of nice to share that with the staff.
Thanks for sharing that with our community. Thanks so much, Jesus.
Thank you.